All right, welcome back. It's now time for us to get straight into the people and politics. My guests are here. Wakili Gibson Gisore is already in studio. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
It's a tough one. Arnold Maliba, also governance expert. Karibu sana.
Asante.
And Daniel Orogo, who is a governance expert. You had some rough time with me in the studio last week. You call all manner of names, but that's the nature. We live to fight every single day. Director, probably we start with the reaction on what the politician said yesterday before we get into our discussion.
On playing banning of street protests by interior
and further comments by a few of us.
Speaking after a meeting that took stock of the planned demonstrations and the state of signature collection, the Azimio MPs remained defiant and they will hit the streets for 3 days in their push for the repealing of the Finance Act.
The thousands of Kenyans turning up for protests are not just Azimio supporters. They are Kenyans from across all political and non-political formations who have been brought together by suffering.
The MPs downplaying banning of street protests by Interior CS Gisore Kindiki, terming it as an attempt to subvert the constitution.
These protests will go on in line with Article 37 of our constitution, which, as you all know, provides for freedom of peaceful assembly and picketing. And no person, no authority has got the power to suspend the operation of Article 37 of our Constitution.
The legislators calling on police not to use force on protesters. It claims the protests are part of keeping the Kenya Kwanza administration on check after it abandoned its promises, while dismissing assertions that the street protests are proxy political battles.
Bring down the cost of living today. And you will not be on the streets on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
In Nairobi, we live as a community. Kikuyu, Luya, Jaluo, kila mtu hapa. Saa ile Jaluo analala njaa, Muluya analala njaa, Mkikuyu analala njaa.
Kenyans are past that stage. And since they lack imagination, Kenya Kwanza is the only political formation still thinking and talking about this handshakes and the rest.
Now that is on the front page of the Star newspaper. Hardliners blocking Ruto and Raila truce. Let me start with you, Arnold Maliba. Good morning, once again. Hardliners, you've heard what is there. In street language, you use it kind, according to the hardliners. Kind.
Well, when it comes to, I also have got a little bit of a problem with how you then frame who is a hardliner and who is not. Because literally what everyone is doing until this particular point, I don't think we've really gotten to a place where we're actually talking about hardliners. What are people asking for? What is the opposition asking for? Are we really at a place where there are things that should be done, they are supported in law, and people both on the opposition and in government are actually saying no to it? Not yet. I do not think we've gotten there. I've also just seen the MP for Ugunja saying that there is no law that can suspend whatever is happening. We've got Article 137. He probably doesn't know that he's forgotten that there is a declaration of emergency. So there are still more tools to a place where we get to saying that things are so bad. But then we need to give ourselves an opportunity to stop. We don't always have to get to the edge of sanity. We don't have to get to the edge of law before we actually can call ourselves back. Over the last 60 years, of course, as a nation, we've known when to stop. I still have got the hope, even though hope is not a strategy, that as a nation, we will still know where to stop. Because sometimes then you are left to be like Abraham, hoping against hope. That's the only thing you can do. So the issue of hardliners and everything else, we need to ask ourselves, how did we get here? All of us have actually contributed to getting here. This is the point we need to start calling ourselves here. I've seen today the media coming out as a little bit now becoming the impartial umpire. But a lot of times they've actually cheered on and even picked sides in the process. There's the role the opposition has played to bring us here. There's the role, of course, the people in government have actually done. But then what do we choose? You're asking, what do we really, as in what is the edge? For me, I will actually say that we choose Kenya over everything else. That we cannot lose this country whether it's about ambition, whether it's about the challenges we have. Because the good thing with Kenyans is that I think we've got 83% literacy. A number of Kenyans are quite enlightened. We are a nation. We are not the nation of our grandfathers, but we are quite an enlightened nation today, as compared to the past. So I know that there are factors that people, if talked to, would understand that they are beyond what we can do as a nation, but that together we can work out a solution. Yeah.
Okay. Daniel?
Well, good morning, Victor.
Good morning to you.
I think it's also a pleasure to be here this morning. Very critical questions. The same challenges I had in the last panel, just trying to demystify the fact that the political class, including ourselves, would not really try to avoid to dictate what actually the media can portray and can have in their headlines. The media is an interested player, and the media has got a freedom to set the agenda, carry forward any headlines they would want, and is hell-bent on us as political leaders to try to be articulate enough in areas that we represent or our issues that we would want to be highlighted, or just give an explanation. So I think I just wanted to begin with that by saying that, you see, quite difficult for us always to ask the media what kind of headlines they need to carry forward. But of course we have problems interpreting what the media want to put in their in the flash on their news. But coming to what you've said, very important questions. Sorry, we are not here by accident. There have been concerted efforts to have the country have a ceasefire with regards to this political quagmire that we find ourselves in. And I agree with my friend Arnold. Sometimes I think Kenyans knew to the point that we need to stop and have a conversation, serious conversations on matters that are affecting the country. We are a country that has learned from the effects of electoral-related violence. We are still reeling from the effects. I mean, 2008, just a few years ago, and there's a recovery process. There's still a reconciliation process that has not been complete in some, in some parts of this country. And this has been heightened by the political rhetoric that is similar to what we are seeing, a remnants of what we are seeing right now from political leaders. I think that is fact. So for me, I think one is always I keep being careful when to mention who is leading this or not. Because all these political parties are players. There's a sense in which the two political leaders, to some extent, had to cease fire and call for a constructive dialogue. And each of political factions had to propose people to sit on that bipartisan talk. And unfortunately, again, what I struggled to explain in the last set, when the Senator Kenyuri was here, trying to demystify the fact that we can sit and maybe analyze half-truths, right? When one party fronts forward to explain why there was a failure of a dialogue, or the failure to cease fire and have a political truce, why the other party is not there. We wouldn't want to fall into the temptation of similarly doing so. But one thing I know as a country, like my colleagues would agree, that I think it comes a point when the nation, like Arnold has said, the nation is important. But again, that in effect needs to be explained. Then what is the nation? What is this nation that we need to put forward and consider? What is the constitution? What is the constituents of a nation? As we are going to discuss and maybe ask that the politicians are not important as a nation. But of course, what is the constitutionality? What is the constitution of a nation? That we need to discuss as well.
That brings to the question, because Wakili, where do we draw the line between the rights, freedoms, and responsibilities? Because at the end of the day, if I listen to the two gentlemen, there is one denominator: when to stop. All right, however good you are, you must be in a position to say, I need to exit. But at what point as Kenyans do we say it's time now for us to exit?
The point is, thank you, Victor, for inviting me for this show. I think my co-panelists have really tried to bring it clearly. Regards to your question, where do we stop? We stop at the law. We stop at the place called the law. Arnold believes we need to stop at the place called Kenya, but we're already in Kenya. And then the question comes, which my friend has tried to explain and tell us, that what is Kenya? What is Kenya? Kenya is comprised of tribes. If we continue keeping this on for a little longer, that is going to come out. And we're going to have the 1992, we're going to have the 207, 208, we're going to have a lot of things. Already we are seeing undertones of that happening in the Nandi-Kisumu border. I mean, people are already fighting.
Yeah.
I don't know whether what is happening in Transmara is also akin to that. So if we continue keeping this up, that is going to come even up to Nairobi. And we will start now fighting each other. And that's what comprises of Kenya. If we are not going to be a bit cautious, or the political divide is not going to tone down their issues, because I believe what we have is a political challenge.
Yes.
Because Kenyans understand that the economy is bad. That is very true. It's very clear to everyone, and it's not lost on everyone. But they also know that we have a country called Kenya. If we have somebody who is at the helm, whom you trust, and you believe that is going to steer you to the shore, the captain is going to steer you to the shore, then Kenyans do not have any option of sitting around and waiting for the clear direction to be taken to the shore. Because we are in a ship. We cannot all decide to jump into the water just because we don't trust the captain.
Yes.
We need to at least give the captain cut him some slack to ensure that we get to the shore. But when you have people in the ship who already want to burn down the ship and the waters, then we need to decide whether do we all want to sail safely to the end, or do we decide as Kenyans or as people in this particular vessel that we are going to ensure that there is proper accountability, that this vessel is actually chartered to the right place.
The issue of accountability is quite important, and I really want us to talk about the issue of governance, because that now is a common denominator. When you talk of governance, from 2010 Constitution, everything changed. But what is stopping us from making some headways, Arnold? 2010 Constitution was made and customized for us as a nation to have some certain, open landscape for us to develop as a nation. But why is it stopping us from making some headways 13 years later?
Truth is that we've made so much headway. We need to give ourselves a pat on the back for where we've come. Before 2013, of course, before 2010, well, let's just talk about 2013, there was no devolution as we know it. Our political landscape and architecture has really changed so drastically that it's not the same. Normally, I love to say that a part of the Bill of Rights and devolution are the only two things you can't take away from Kenyans today. Because if you did, then there will be a revolution. There's no way you're going to actually convince even my mother in the village or my grandmother that devolution is a bad thing. They understand that there are challenges to it, there's the teething problem around it, but they know that this is a very good thing. So things have changed. We've made progress. There are places where a little bit, this country is more open as we move towards that. I know there's a little bit of a hangover from the old constitutional order, where we had a number of things. We still want to call cabinet secretaries, ministers. We really struggle to even work out, and a number of things have not really good. But those are actually small things. We actually have made progress. What we have a problem, and actually we need to actually speak to ourselves. The war and where we are going to.
Yes.
Normally, people have said that the war does not determine who is right or who is wrong. It only determines who is left. Because in the process,
in what sense?
during a war, it's sometimes, like during a war, you don't remember who started and what was the cause. People just hit each other continuously. So those who will survive are the only ones who come out. And then, of course, we write history, and then the victors write history as it turns out. But in a war, it's not who is right. It's not at the end of a war. It will never be about who was right and who is wrong. I just need to actually, if you went to the mothers and the daughters, children, and the people who are related to the 1,300 people who were killed during the post-election violence, what will they tell you? Will they tell you about who was right and who was wrong?
Yes.
They will not tell you about that. They will only be mourning the loss that they have. We already have lost about 6 or 7 people in these particular protests. You've not seen any of our leaders, for example, even condole with their parents. Some of them are so young, they've left very young children. So even as we talk about pushing people and egging on, the truth is that our rights have got limits. and Wakili will actually talk about that, there's Article 24. So there is a limit to that. And then now, probably we need to get to a place where I think other people can actually call it splitting of hairs.
Yeah.
There's a reason why the drafters of Article 37, the drafters of the Constitution, chose to use the word demonstrate and not protest. In other jurisdictions, every country has got, if you look at Article 260, it defines a lot of terms so that there is not we don't mix up things.
Yes.
So in other jurisdictions, protest means demonstration. It's sometimes used interchangeably. But is what we are seeing in the streets what Article 37 really is about? Because Article 37 actually goes ahead to qualify what they mean by the picketing and demonstration.
And the limitation
They talk about peaceably, unarmed. We have seen sticks, we have seen bows and arrows, we have seen stones. Even where people are not armed, we have seen people using their hands. Now that comes into the issue of peaceably. So, is what we are seeing in the streets covered under Article 37? I will tell you no. It's easy to argue and get academic about this, but what we see in the streets is not that. Elsewhere, if I look at other laws and how other people define a protest is a violent process that then seeks concessions by way of violence. A demonstration will be a show of displeasure for a policy, an idea, a law, or something else. So we are at a place where we love to conflate. And you see, these politicians are not stupid. You know, the one thing people think is that politicians, they are not. There are people who are so clever in this country. There are professors who cannot even win the chairman of a cattle dip competition. So politicians, even that one in the village whom you think is so stupid, you know, a lot of times we actually have degreeized this country to a level that we think that going to school in and of itself is actually education. We are confusing our going to school with education. It's not the same.
Okay.
So these guys are educated in the dynamics of how to manipulate people, how to go about these issues. So if we are going to keep on talking about Article 37, when we see some of these things actually qualify for riots, when we see some of those things really do not work for what Article 37 is, then we end up here. Like he has said, is that we are a nation of not 42 tribes. Actually, we should be about 72 tribes. The others have not been recognized. There's a process to that particular end. A lot of times, out of self-preservation, people then go back to those cocoons.
Yes, the tribal lines.
No, the tribes are bad. That is who we are as a people. It's our heritage and everything else. But if that is all there is about us, then there is a problem.
Okay.
So as people push on, then people forget. Remember, let's talk about the Kericho and Kisumu border.
Yes.
Initially, the protests were about the cost of living. But then when people feel like if I am from the other side, Orogo is on the other side and I'm on this other side, when I'm attacked, the people on my side will feel like, okay.
There's a form of retaliation.
And then it picks up from that particular end. So we need to stop now. And when I talk about stopping now is that we have got a platform of dialogue called Parliament.
But is it working? I mean, the
minority
will say they don't have
now Wakili,
enough muscle.
Victor, Wakili said that we need to stop at the law.
Okay.
What does the law say about that? Because we have got a legitimate parliament in place. Because what is the definition of a parliament? A parliament, in and of itself, is the representation of a nation. When you look at a parliament, you should see a nation. That is the village square of the nation. We have got 47 other parliaments where we can actually push these things. Has that been given an opportunity? No. A lot of these things, and actually I've said this, 50% of everything that we are asking for can be fought for through Parliament.
David, Daniel, come in.
I mean, Maliba, we've been on this for a long time. It could be understand that our journey with Maliba has been through NYC and all these other struggles that we've been putting up here.
Yes.
But you see, I really tend to think that probably Maliba could be having a problem with the operations of Article 37. I don't know, maybe he can, but I've heard him mention severally that whatever is being witnessed right now is not in tandem with the provisions of Article 37. But I think that probably could be debatable, because then would we then seek for other provisions that have actually been violated even with the states? Because to be fair as possible, then people would argue that even as peaceful protests, guys do a peaceful protest, and demonstrate, but then there had been an excessive use of force. Then it also qualifies us to go back and look at then what is being provided by the Police Service Act as well. People would go ahead and poke holes to the existing laws and just try to find out why those, there has been a breach of that.
Yes.
But that's subject as to why we're here, for us to discuss the interpretation and how, we actually implement some of these provisions that are provided. But let me ask you, and I agree. Your question is governance, democracies versus
rights and responsibilities.
Rights and responsibilities.
When you hear politicians,
yes,
trying to use Article 37.
Yes.
Wakili here and all of us would tell us Article 37 is now the commonly used article right now, since for the last, after 2, 6, 7, 3 months,
yes,
the most used article. But why has Constitution 2010 not completely, given us some kind of a capsule out of that article?
I mean, we probably could be quite interesting to listen to Wakili, but my views are, and I agree with, they have been progressive. Our constitution is a bit progressive. There have been gains that have been made by this constitution. And I think we are in different settings, in different platforms where Kenyan constitution has been hailed as one of the progressive constitution in the region and probably in the continent, and other jurisdictions are coming to learn.
Yes.
The progress that we've made from the constitution. And I've been touting, my friends, that during for example, the US Summit for Democracy, and in Lusaka I had Zambians actually quoting some of the provisions of our constitution. The progress, for example, that we made with the Finance Act, the Finance Act that are provided in the constitution, learning differently on how we implement, the CDF Act, the Government Constituency Development Act, and other laws in this country. So, I keep on telling you in this panel that is not bad as we think, because there are other countries that are really seeing progress in what we do.
Yeah.
The jittery that we are having right now, and some of these are expected. The American, for them to have been where they are, there have been a number of hiccups within their constitution. British, which do not have a constitution, Britain, which do not have a written constitution, had got a number of hiccups for them to become politically, economically stable as they are right now. So I would like to agree, provisions, progressive provisions, for example, in Chapter 4, that were included in the Constitution. And I agree that there might be a problem with regards to the interpretation of the actualization of that Constitution, but it's well that is there. It safeguards rights, it guarantees some of the rights that were not there before. And I simply still have a problem for some of the people who think that some of these provisions should be amended and uplifted, especially the rights, the sacred rights for demonstration, for example, the economic and social rights that are provided in the Constitution. I purely have a problem with some people who think that
all
that
agree
should be
that
amended.
politicians,
Also,
we all agree that politicians understand.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I also had my colleague Arnold saying, that we do not understand that there can be a declaration of a state of emergency, to some extent.
Yes.
Which makes me,
Before
and by the way,
37.
and by the way, quoting Article 137, and by the way, as I was coming to study, I might have thought that as the situation is probably might degenerate, there might be an invoking of the state of declaration. I didn't know that probably that could have been mentioned, but I was thinking about it. That even as we are heading to this state, someone might have invoked the provision of this. Because Arnold is mentioning it,
yes.
and you see, it's not by default that he's mentioning it. Probably, it's been a discussion that is being discussed in some quarters.
Perhaps you can give us an
that there might be an invoking of that
you
chapter.
see, Victor, Daniel here is my younger brother. I've come a long way with him. I know what he's trying to actually say, but I'll tell you this. I'm a legal scholar, over and above everything else I do. And I know when we were talking about have we reached the limit, and I said there are still tools to employ. At this particular point, do we really need to get Article 37 right? For example, you do not need to go to law school, for example, to actually just read Article 37 and get. What does it start with? It actually begins with everybody, peaceably and unarmed.
Yeah.
So when you show up with a stick, you are armed. When you show up with a stone, you are armed. But you see, before the arming part of it is peaceably, even when you show up with bare hands, there is an aunt of mine who actually, when she's in trouble, she says, I didn't leave my hands at home. So even these are called arms. So even as you go out, and you are not peaceful, that in itself already nullifies what Article 37 is. We have seen destruction of property, both public and private. So if you still insist that Article 37 covers that, you are not being honest. And this is the truth. What are we really talking about now? What is the problem? The cost of living, right? No one, even government knows, everybody is in agreement. That is not just here, it is actually global. And let us not even like equate ourselves to other people. Let's just talk about our situations. We know where we are. Was the cost of living high last year? Yes. Were the people who are talking now talking? No. Some of them were actually telling us to shut up. Some of them were telling us they will sort that. Was the cost of living high in 2021? Yes, Victor, you and I were here. Was the cost of living high in 2020? Yes. Did the national, rather the sovereign debt, when did we breach that? We breached that when some of these people were in parliament. When we messed up with the Public Finance Management Act, PFMA, we breached it. It had put a limit to 55% of our GDP. We had a sitting parliament. People did not talk about that. We are where we are here because we kept quiet over the time. And are we all, everybody in this particular struggle, are we in for the same thing? I'll give you, let's go to where Daniel wants us to go. When there was the first Mandamano, do you remember the order of demands as given by the people who are calling Mandamano? It was servers, everything, and the cost of living, was number 4. Yes. Go back to it. And it took we pundits who come here to actually tell them that how you have prioritized that is not how a normal mwananchi will actually receive it. So eventually then they have swapped that, and now they're talking about the cost of living. This, for me, I'll tell you, these are intervening circumstances for those who organize. Yes. Because there are people who organize everyday demonstrations and we don't even report them. The media doesn't even recognize them. Last year there was Sabasaba. It wasn't a big deal. Because who was organizing? Civil society, the usual people. This time, politicians are hijacking the anger.
So does the common man
Can I finish? Can I finish that? Can I finish that?
As you finish,
I hadn't executed my point. Let me just finish.
What I was asking is, in that circumstances, in the context, and I agree, Maliba, why would anyone think of even invoking, an article on a state?
Can I read Article 37?
That is what I was. Even to have a thought, a discussion about it. What would have triggered that kind of conversation in this context?
Let me read you Article 137.
Yes.
Article 137, state of emergency. The state of emergency may be declared only under Article 132. We could go back there and see that. 4D, and only when the state is threatened by war, invasion, general insurrection, disorder, natural disaster, or other public emergency. The declaration is necessary to meet, and part B of it says, the declaration is necessary to meet the circumstances for which the emergency is declared. So, and I said, when I actually mentioned this, I said that we've not reached there. I still do not believe that we have not used all the tools within, because there is do we really need to always push the constitution to the limit? No, we don't.
Because when we use the constitution, there's that level of freedom, Wakili, freedom and rights. But most of the time, we usually confuse the two. This is my right, this is my freedom, and then there's that legal aspect. So where do we combine the two so that they walk hand in hand in one capsule?
Where we combine the two is where we create a clear recognition that wherever your rights start, mine end. Wherever mine end, yours start. That is the basic clear-cut definition of how we can be able to create a nexus between the rights and freedoms and liberties which we enjoy. Because if I'm going to enjoy my rights endlessly, even to trample upon yours, then there is I've violated the aspect of your own rights and the freedom of exercise of those rights. You know, rights are exercised, and the aspect that if in demonstration of my rights I end up affecting you, then I'm not going by the constitution or by the law. Then I should be charged. Because where the rights end, where the rights of one person end is where the other person's rights start. My right to picket and demonstrate does not need to affect my friend's business of running a shop. It shouldn't. So if we have that clear understanding, my right of having a political say to sway my followers towards a particular petition which I want to present does not need to affect public transport. That is what we need to have clear in our minds. If we can be able to apply those simple principles. But that aside, Victor, what I wanted to say when the two are trying to get into each other's throat, there is a country called Kenya, but it's comprised of tribes. It's very easy for Kenyans to always sign off from Kenya to go to their tribal cocoons.
Yes.
People sign out very quickly.
It's just in our mind.
Yes, it's automatic.
Yes.
And then there is that challenge of, Maliba talks about, is it 83% of Kenyans schooled? But then schooling is different from understanding the application of the law. That's the other challenge. When it's when time gives chance, people say no from the from the law. They say Baba akisema ametusomea. That is the law. That's how simple we start thinking, and that is where the problem lies.
And that is where the rain starts beating us.
Yes,
we tend to take the entire constitution and bank into the head of someone.
Yes,
right?
And then we now become enemies of each other, not knowing. We don't talk about the constitution that time. We are talking about where have these people done this? Where are these people killing our people? Where are these people against our people being in power? That becomes a problem. And that now divides us and lets us walk away from the nation Kenya, lets us walk away from what is called the constitution. That is the biggest challenge. Once we can be able to solve that, we'll be able to have a cohesive, because you remember the Americans believe in their system so much that whenever there's a problem, they will tell you, let the law handle it, let the police handle it, let the process. Believe in the process. We don't have a process in Kenya which we can believe in.
We believe in
the constitution in Kenya is very easy to sign out from that. We don't have a nationhood which we can be able to fall back on and say, hey guys, we do not need to cross this line. That is lost on the politicians, is lost on the education system, is lost on everybody who calls himself a Kenyan by tribe. Because now you are first a tribe first before you are a Kenyan. So if we can be able to sort those challenges, where did the rain start beating us? You ask that question. The rain started beating us when we had the 23rd Constitution, because it's akin to the process where people say that it's the same forest, it's the same monkey seed, but the forest has changed. The earlier dispensation which we had, you can actually see, if you can actually look keenly, even people who were demonstrating in 1992 have come to the streets. It's like they never left. After all these years, that's close to 30 years. That's close to 30 years.
How is it their problem?
These are people who knew how Sabasaba started.
Yes.
When they had the clarion call, they are up there in the streets.
That's my question.
And they are leading the pack. They're leading the pack of people who were born in 2000.
In 2007, 1992, the fight for multi-party democracy. We are in 2023.
Yes.
But why hasn't the 2010 constitution stopped us from going back to the trenches? That is my basic question.
Let me answer you that. Let me answer you that before my
based on what you think, the same people who were demonstrating.
What trenches? They were fighting for multi-party democracy. We have got multi-party democracy. They were fighting for a new constitution. We have got the new constitution. The stage where we are today, Wakili, is what I call the third and final liberation. That is my opinion, and that is pegged on Article 43, socio-economic empowerment. That the first struggle, or rather the first liberation, was to kick out the white man and colonialism. The second liberation was for good governance, and it is embodied in the Constitution 2010. The next level, whether you have got a progressive constitution and you are in a free country like ours, it must reflect in the quality of life you live. And that's why I say that the third and final liberation is Article 42. We cannot use the tools we used for the first liberation. We cannot use the same tools we used in the second liberation to achieve the third liberation.
That was our discussion here last week.
So the reason why we are today, the reason why we are here today is that there are people who have never learned how to do things differently, and also there is a generation that has refused to take up its responsibility. And I'll go straight. All of them are seated here, plus you, Victor. You are the millennials. 32% of Kenya's population. Now, the people who are paying the taxes and shouldering everything else, the only millennial with a political party is David Ochieng. The rest of you are in all other people's parties. We are supporting people who, for example, Raila, for example, ran for president at 45. No one here might be 45. People like James Orengo went to parliament before I was born. First, we're not going to parliament, but we have. I'm actually trying to say that part and parcel of the problem of what we have today is the millennials who have refused to stand up for their own nation. And like, he might not really appreciate that we are learned, but I can tell you the things we do and where we are today. Our ancestors,
only that I will not give a chance to explain my point.
Our ancestors would actually see us as white people. So this is the point. I am actually saying that once we have said everything, we also need to call out this particular generation called millennials. Because behind us is a generation called Generation Z. They are much more global. They love to be part and parcel of their problems. They love to solve them. They are entrepreneuring. They are not as selfish as we who are millennials.
Okay.
And behind them, there's another generation called the Alpha generation. So even as we call out these people, the 1992s, I don't know if they want to call them dinosaurs or whatever, also ask, what are the young people doing?
Okay, Daniel, come in. But first of all, Wakili, appreciate that you are learned.
I'm learned. You misunderstood my point.
I think in the last set I also made a very clear assertion that, you see, the temptation to always forget to account for our historical achievements, to usher a transition from a generation to another. I mean, you're mentioning, the American democracies and all these democracies we are mentioning, giving us best practices. They have their own challenges, but I think, like Wakili Gisore was mentioning, there is a sense in which that generation to generation is bequeathed, by having a history and understanding that the struggle that has been here through and through, and therefore if we pass over the baton to you, even as you face the challenges that are contextual, but this is what constitutes a nation. Any other nation or nationhood. That is what I wanted to put across. So in the last set, we equally struggled, and I agree. I wish Arnold Maliba was here equally, because we had a session here and a panel who probably did not appreciate the value of that progression from one transition to another in terms of struggles.
What is talking about now, the third liberation?
The third liberation that we are mentioning. Yeah. But the sense is, while we appreciate that it's that generation, that do not want to take a responsibility, which I probably have a contrary opinion to. The issue is that what is bequeathed to us that we learn, what then do we learn from that generation? What is the trend? What is not only the trend, but what is the best practices to say what that we can get from the previous generation to run through? Because, for example, we are talking about a government that is highly indebted. A government that, a government of opposition as not only the government, the lessons that we are learning from opposition, for example, the lessons that we are learning from the government, do young people really feel that the fact that they would get themselves in that kind of political, environment as well? Yeah. Ask around, the millennials that Arnold are mentioning, even us seated here, and I agree that you acknowledge that we are all sitting in people's political parties. But even the political parties that we could constitute, what is that terrain that allows us, even us, to form a political party? The system in itself, the process in itself, the energy in itself, the investment in itself, does that provide a leeway and a smooth transition where young people can definitely bequeath themselves for a political party to chant their way forward legally? And the two are arguing whether it is education or learned, or people are learned or educated. But even as young people are pushing through that particular platform, what is those opportunities for education? What is those opportunities to learn? So even as we lampoon all this, even as we discuss all this, I think we should give it a context and realities that we are facing right now in this country.
I'm told that PLO Lumumba is already on Radio Taifa, and he's also following up this discussion. And I really want to pick it from where he's left. So, PLO Lumumba...
Would you mind if I just said one thing to the nation before you go?
My point. I think my chance was taken away from me by Arnold.
We can't afford this opportunity not to speak to the nation when we have got a likely Waterloo tomorrow. So just allow us an opportunity, kindly. I just need to tell this to Kenyans. Number one, we might be a country that is not yet a nation. He's spoken about tribes. That is there.
There you have him.
But that we have got Kenya, and that at the ambition of a few, there are intervening circumstances that the politicians are riding on to precipitate a polarization that could push us in a crisis. I want to tell young people out there that a lot of times old men will declare war, but it's the young men that will actually do the fighting. I already have said that in a war, it does not determine who was right or who was wrong. It determines who is left.
I think we've
so
learned that
let us pick Kenya over any other thing, because we have always solved our problems. We have been a progressive nation. In Kenya, you cannot achieve anything through a revolution. It's been progressive. Even our independence, there was both the struggle in the forest, but a lot of it, actually the biggest part of it, was in the boardroom.
Okay. Arnold, kindly. My director is going to Kutunyoa.
Yes, I think what I was saying before Arnold took off with my point is the aspect that the challenge we had is that we had the Kenyan constitution and politicians dropped the ball on us. There was a very big issue, 80% and 20%, which can make us we go forward. But then there was a bigger discussion which was left unhandled. The aspect of civic education, so that we civilize Kenyans. There's a difference between going to school and being educated or miseducated, and then there's a difference of actually being learned, understanding the circumstances you are in, and the best tools to apply. So that is the difference. I'm not saying that Kenyans are not educated. They are actually indeed, and very well. But the aspect of being learned and understanding what the politician says in terms of Article 37 is where we draw the line. We need to understand that and sensitize Kenyans to know what applies where and when.
Director says that this discussion is actually being picked by PLO, because they are going to talk about now in the Kiswahili version. Uyano and Utangamano ya kitaifa, that's what they're going to be part of their discussion. But we are going to have this discussion next week.
You need to call us again, to finish, especially me, to finish my point.
Victor, these guys have talked the
we have to cross to Zinga. We have to cross to Zinga. We have to cross to Zinga. All right. Director, let's just cross over to Zinga for the discussion. Arnold, Maliba, thank you. Daniel Orogo, and of course, Wakili Gisore. Mitka Rumo, that's what we say in Luo. It's sweet. Tukimaliza. All right. Good morning.